stuff that she's saying you is what you all will agree on once we get the thing. Good morning, colleagues. Just to let you know that we will be starting on time, even if it's only one person in the room. So here is your 5-minute warning. We're starting at 9 o'clock. Please inform your friends in the dining room that we're starting at 9 o'clock.
Oh, good. Sorry.
Mr. Bo? Hi, morning. Just want to do a... Hi, morning.
Yes,
Yeah,
sir.
yeah. This is Garrett Ferguson here from the Trinidad and Tobago Parliament. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you very clearly, Mr. Ferguson.
All right. So I'm gonna get the speakers, the conference position to call in also and just make a check.
Okay.
That's the guy from Trinidad.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Be right back.
Is my level okay? Voice level? Is the voice level okay?
Good morning. Can you let me know who from Trinidad is making the presentation, please?
Yes, it's Francis Lewis. I'm an independent senator.
Mr. Francis Lewis?
Yes. Did
Thank
you
you.
get the bio that was sent?
Yes, I have a bio for that person. Thank you very much.
You're most welcome.
Test. So I see that the Zoom connection is successful. I had it open. You can hear us and we can hear you no problem, correct?
Yes.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Actually, is there any way you could bring your output gain down maybe 2 or 3 dB? Seems a little bit fuzzy. Is your tech person there?
In down.
Who's he talking to? There's no one on the screen.
Just talk to me one more time. Say your ABCs or something.
Kevin, Mr. Lewis, Senator Lewis, morning.
Yes, are you talking to me, Mr. Lewis?
I was just testing.
I was testing 1, 2, 3, 4 testing to make sure that the levels were right.
Can you bring it?
Okay.
Can you
very
bring it
good.
again?
I'm seeing it.
Thank you very much.
We'll roll with that. Thanks.
Okay.
Okay, we okay for levels?
Still a little fuzzy. We're not over on our side. Seems like you're over on your side. You just, I don't know if you're using a speaker out, the headphone out, or if you're doing it through an interface. Maybe just bring your output
Yeah,
gain
I can
down like
introduce
2 or 3
I'm
dB.
not gonna say much about the topic.
Okay, testing one, two, three, four. I think they're trying to make adjustments at this end.
Okay, keep talking.
Okay, my name is Francis Lewis. I'm very pleased to be doing this presentation this morning to the CAA conference. We're testing the gain levels to make sure that all is well and that I'm coming through clearly. Let me know if you need me to continue talking, and I will continue to do so.
Okay, that seems to be better. Thank you so much, sir.
You're very welcome. Thank you very much.
Hi, good day. We just sent a request for screen sharing. I don't know if any one of you guys could just allow us to do it, so we can do a test before it starts.
Good morning, colleagues. I've given you 5 minutes grace, so we are going to get started. The topic today, we have to start on time because the general meeting is supposed to start at 10, so we can't interfere with their time. So the topic for discussion this morning, good morning, colleagues. The topic for discussion today is financing Parliament budgetary restraints. And we have two worthy presenters, Honorable Catherine Ebanks Wilkes and Senator Francis Lewis from Trinidad. Financing of Parliament is a subject that most of us parliamentarians act like it's taboo. Often we feel intimidated or embarrassed about it for fear of criticism from fellow parliamentarians and especially the opposition. Our first presenter today is, as I said earlier, Honorable Catherine Ebanks Wilkes MP, who is currently the Minister of Health, Environment and Sustainability in the Cayman Islands. Honorable Catherine Ebanks Wilkes was first elected in 2021 as a Member of Parliament for West Bay Central and re-elected in 2025. During her first term, she served as Parliamentary Secretary, Deputy Speaker, Minister of Sustainability and Climate Resilience, and later in the opposition, MP. In December 2022, she became the youngest speaker in the Cayman Islands history, holding key roles including Chair of the Parliament Management Council and President of the CPA Cayman Islands branch. With over 15 years in the legal sector, she brings experience from both private practice and the Law Reform Commission. Now serving, as I said, as Minister of Health, Environment and Sustainability, she remains a dedicated advocate for her constituents and for politics that promote well-being and environmental stewardship. Catherine.
Honorable members of the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association, distinguished delegates and esteemed colleagues, a pleasant good morning to each of you. I'm not sure how many of you looked out of the view this morning of your room and wish that you could sit by the seaside or under a tree and enjoy the breeze. And hopefully, as I was walking over here today, I thought we'd have sometime later on this afternoon that we could do just that. I see we have many empty chairs, so I'm hoping that our colleagues will make their way over soon. But it's such a beautiful day in the Bahamas. I can understand why everyone is struggling to get around the table. It is an honor and privilege to stand before you this morning to discuss a matter that lies at the very heart of our democratic institutions, the financial autonomy of parliaments across the region. This topic is not merely vital, it is the lifeblood that sustains our legislative bodies as we strive to enhance our effectiveness in serving the needs of the people we represent. You heard in my bio, as Mr. Speaker said, previously, those of you who have attended some of the other regional conferences might recall that I attended in my capacity as former speaker. So it is a different experience to be here at this regional conference in my capacity as minister. Throughout my time Serving as Speaker in the Cayman Islands, I witnessed, let's see what's going on here now. I witnessed firsthand the challenges posed by budgetary constraints and the pressing need for financial independence within our parliamentary systems. Today, I will share insights not only on the progress we're making in the Cayman Islands, but also on the advancements and best practices being implemented across our region. Let us take a moment to reflect on history. For far too long, many parliaments operated under a model where financial control was tightly held by the executive branch. Budget requests from Parliament were often treated as secondary to government needs, with funding allocated based on the political considerations rather than the actual requirements of the legislative body. This created an environment where parliaments were not only underfunded, but also unable to fulfill their constitutional roles effectively. And we know that that still exists in many countries. But if we think back to the early days of our parliamentary systems, resources were scarce and funding processes were cumbersome. In the United Kingdom, King Charles I's refusal to call Parliament for extended periods and his attempts to govern without its consent led to significant tensions. After dissolving Parliament in 1629, Charles ruled for 11 years without a Parliament, relying on alternative sources of revenue, such as ship money. When he finally called Parliament back in 1640 to address his financial needs, the conflict over financial control escalated, contributing to the outbreak of the English Civil War in 1642. This struggle underscored the necessity for Parliament to have a say in its funding and operations, as the King's unilateral decisions stifled its ability to function effectively. In recent years, we faced reduced budget allocations for parliaments, which limits the ability to advocate for the needs and modernize the legislative functions. After all, we cannot have a vibrant democracy if our parliaments are starved of resources. The necessity to submit requests to Treasury for every funding requirement leads to potential delays and restrictions that hinder the Parliament's effectiveness. The impact of these budget constraints can be profound. In Jamaica, the Parliamentary Budget Office Act 2013 was enacted to enhance Parliament's capacity for independent financial analysis and budgetary oversight. This legislation establishes the Parliament This legislation establishes the Parliamentary Budget Office, which provides essential support in reviewing government's fiscal policies and budget proposals. However, it is important to note that while this act strengthens Parliament's analytical capabilities, it does not provide complete financial autonomy for the Parliament to independently request funding or manage its expenditures. The funding for Parliament still requires approval from the Ministry of Finance, meaning that while the Act is beneficial for enhancing oversight, the lack of financial autonomy limits Parliament's ability to manage its staff and operations effectively. Similarly, in Barbados, they have made significant strides towards financial independence with the establishment of its Parliamentary Management Act 2019. This Act's objective includes promoting the efficient operation of Parliament and establishing a framework for self-governance that enhances accountability and transparency. While it empowers Parliament to manage its own budget, this management is still subjective to the approval by the Ministry of Finance. The process involves the Parliament's Finance Committee working closely with the Speaker and the Clerk to develop a budget that reflects parliamentary priorities. Although this model allows for timely responses to funding requirements, it does not grant Parliament the full financial autonomy needed to independently manage its staff and operations, which remains a critical area for improvement. In Trinidad and Tobago, the Parliamentary Authority Act 2014 enhances the independence of Parliament by providing it with greater authority over its budget and administrative functions. This act empowers Parliament to develop its budget independently from the executive branch, allowing it to operate with less interference. The legislation establishes a framework for resource allocation based on the needs of parliamentary committees and the legislative agenda. Additionally, it allows for the establishment of financial management systems within Parliament, enabling it to oversee its expenditures more effectively. While this act represents significant progress towards financial autonomy, the Parliament still faces challenges in fully accessing the necessary funds to manage its staff and operations independently, indicating further reforms are needed to achieve true financial independence. In contrast, the Parliament of Canada Act provides a robust model of financial autonomy. This act grants the Canadian Parliament the authority to manage its funding independently from the executive branch. By establishing a framework that allows Parliament to allocate its resources and manage its budget, including staffing and operational expenses, the Act ensures that legislative functions can proceed without interference from the executive. The independence afforded by this legislation empowers Parliament to prioritize its needs, engage in thorough research, and address the concerns of the people effectively. Furthermore, by enabling Parliament to establish its administrative structures, the Act supports a more dynamic and responsive legislative body that can adapt to changing circumstances. While challenges do exist in various regions regarding the need for greater independence and responsiveness, the ongoing discussions and movements for reform reflect a collective recognition of the importance of empowering parliaments to fulfill their roles effectively. Earlier this week, at the Women's Conference, the Honorable Minister for the Bahamas, Minister Pia, I can't remember her last name, she referenced the importance of considering infrastructural needs of women at the parliamentary precinct. This is much easier to accomplish when we do have financial autonomy at parliaments. While many administrations may support the needs of Parliament, it needs to be designed in a way where the needs of Parliament are prioritized and not deliberated on in the same fashion as every other ministerial line item. By doing this, we can naturally foster greater female participation by making Parliament a more attractive space for women, especially those women who have families, young families. When a Parliament has the authority to manage its own finances without competing factors, it can significantly enhance its effectiveness and responsiveness. Financial autonomy allows parliaments to prioritize resources according to the immediate and emerging needs of the people we serve. It enables the Parliament to invest in research, engage with stakeholders, and ensure that the legislative agenda aligns with the people, with the interest of the people that we serve. It is often said that money makes the world go round, but in our case, we want to ensure that it makes the legislative process spin smoothly and efficiently. Picture a Parliament fully equipped and empowered, able to respond swiftly to crises, innovate, and modernize without having to navigate through bureaucratic hoops. This is the vision that we all should pursue. In the Cayman Islands, we also have the Parliamentary Management Act, which provides our Parliament with the autonomy to oversee the administration of our Parliament and the operations of our Parliament. But we too have not yet gotten to the stage where we have financial autonomy. I saw this firsthand as Speaker, particularly when trying to deal with getting funding, as you still have undue delays and you have to go through the Treasury Department. And in addition to that, Parliament still doesn't have the autonomy to make rapid decisions. One of the pressing concerns that I had as Speaker, and I have been advocating, and I now have a better opportunity to advocate in my capacity as a minister, is that the Parliament has its own, in the Cayman Islands I'm referring to, its own chief financial officer. Presently, we share the chief financial officer with the civil service. So in our conversations over the past few days, I do think that it's still better for us to make steps forward. I think that no one will have gotten it right straight out of the gates. But as we all strive towards establishing acts to make our parliaments more autonomous, we will adapt and modernize as we move along. So for the Cayman Islands, our next step is to try to continue moving towards financial autonomy. And we must recognize that the journey towards financial autonomy for the region is ongoing. As we strive to enhance the roles of our parliaments, we must also engage in conversations about the future of governance. Each of us plays a vital role in shaping the narrative around gender equality in politics. Together, we can create an environment where all voices are valued and collaboration flourishes. In conclusion, while countries like Jamaica, Barbados, Trinidad and Tobago, and the Cayman Islands have established management acts to separate the management and operations of Parliament from the executive, true financial autonomy remains essential. It is only when a Parliament has the authority to manage its own finances that it can prioritize its needs effectively. This independence not only enhances the efficiency and responsiveness of legislative bodies, but it improves democratic processes, participatory democracy, which I know our speaker is very passionate about, and the participation of women in Parliament. By fostering an environment where citizens feel engaged and empowered, Parliament then becomes a place that all citizens want to follow and understand. And I know, as I've had discussions with many of the presiding officers who are in attendance today, I know that that is the vision that I hear coming from each of you, that you all want to ensure that the people of your country want to attend Parliament and follow your parliamentary processes. It has been a genuine honor for me to attend this conference, to engage with such esteemed colleagues, many of you who I've already known and called friends, and also to establish new friendships. And most importantly, to be able to walk away, exchanging contact details of those who I hadn't connected with, knowing that we will now work together to move our region forward, leading the way for effective and efficient parliaments. So let us work together to champion the cause, in this case, financial independence in our parliaments, ensuring that they can thrive as vital components of our democracies. Together, we all can create legislative environments that truly reflect the voices and needs of all of the citizens that we represent. I'd like to thank you all for your attention. I know it's early, and I eagerly look forward to continuing the discussions on this vital topic. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Catherine, for your robust and informative presentation. Our next presenter is Senator Francis Lewis from Trinidad and Tobago. Senator Francis Lewis was appointed independent senator on May the 23rd, 2025, at the start of the 13th Republican Parliament. He previously served as a temporary independent senator during the 12th Republican Parliament. Mr. Lewis is a business strategist with over 30 years of regional experience, with a broad and proven track record in business development, marketing, sales, management, and branding. As a consultant and executive, he has consistently delivered value across diverse industries by helping organizations enhance competitiveness, manage transformation, and drive sustainable growth. Mr. Lewis is also a facilitator and trainer, particularly with frontline leaders and business development professionals. He is also a coach and mentor. As a senior adjunct professor and former head of marketing strategy group at the UWI Jack Global School of Business, he played a foundational role, in the development, having been a startup partner in its pioneering precursor, the Institute of Business. Mr. Lewis has served on boards of numerous commercial enterprises, agencies, and NGOs. I give you Senator Francis Lewis.
Thank you very much, Moderator Miller, for that very kind, rather long introduction, but thank you very much. Good morning to my colleague, Catherine Ebank-Wilkes, and to all of you in the hall. I have a picture up, but it's not terribly clear. I'm so sorry that I could not have joined you all in Bahamas, but I'm so very pleased to be able to join virtually from a very sunny Trinidad and Tobago. I have a short presentation that I'd like to use, which we will pull up. Before starting, I want to congratulate my Jamaican colleagues on their football team's hard-won victory last night, 2-0, I beg your pardon, against Trinidad and Tobago as they advance to the World Cup for next year. In preparing for today, a couple thoughts just to give a bit of context. 22 hours ago, an angry crowd burnt down the Parliament building of Nepal. The finance minister was beaten by a crowd in the streets. In Trinidad and Tobago, on the 23rd of September, 1903, the Red House that houses our Parliament and all of the offices associated with it was burnt down by a very angry crowd. My point in raising both of those very lamentable examples is that whatever we say about budgets, budget restraints, budget constraints, our systems have to work. And when they don't, there are consequences. And in some cases, some very negative consequences. So with that said, let me give a bit of context using Trinidad and Tobago's Parliament as an example. Our Parliament has a staff of about 350 members of staff, professionals across a range of skill areas. They support 73 parliamentarians. 41 are elected, plus the Speaker, in the House of Representatives, and 31 are appointed, and that 31 includes the President of the Senate in the Senate. The elected members come from 41 constituencies, and the Parliament supports 71 constituency offices and sub-offices. But the costing for that and the staffing for that sits in a separate budget. But our administrative staff here have that as a responsibility. What do these people do? What do we do? The House and Senate collectively have about 120 sittings per session, about 60 for each chamber, or a little bit more than perhaps one a week. We have 14 active parliamentary oversight committees, and that's another area of activity. This is paid for with a budget. In TT dollars, it's about 140 million. Converted to US dollars, it's somewhere between 20 and 21 million US dollars per year. And I start with that by asking a very basic question. What do the citizens of this country get for spending this amount of money per year? And that's a question that can be asked of every parliament across the region and beyond. The question becomes, price is what you pay. That's the money going out. But as Warren Buffett reminds us all, value is what you get. Public funds are always finite. There will never be enough money to do all of the things that we would love to do. The need will always exceed means. So we've got to make some choices. We're going to face with greater demands than we have dollars. And the test is really about setting priorities, not simply chasing possibilities. And living within the limits is not a failure, but they are the boundaries within which smart policy must operate. Not unlike if one had a picture frame and one were a painter, you've got to paint within the picture frame. So in the context of this session's title, financing Parliament, budget restraints, and this conference theme of deepening regional democracy and an independent Parliament, beg your pardon, perhaps we ought not to look too narrowly at the challenges of financing parliamentary operations. Not that that is not both a worthy and very necessary topic, but an obvious parallel question that we need to ask ourselves, particularly in light of the events less than 24 hours ago in Nepal and just over a century ago in Trinidad and Tobago, is, does the country think it's getting value from its parliament beyond any entertainment value that gets reported, whether in the media or otherwise? And ultimately, do citizens see their parliament as a good spend, as a good investment? I've only just started serving as an independent senator. As I tell friends, I'm still learning where the bathrooms are. When I ask people, what do you think of Parliament? Very few can give me any kind of definitive answer to either of the questions about value and whether it is a good investment. So, we know, and our constitutions and our whole battery of laws say that we have to have a mandate, and that mandate is representation, lawmaking, and oversight. And very quietly behind the scenes, many of the people in this institution work very hard to achieve that. I'm not sure it's getting communicated to the people who are paying for it. And to the question which was before us about, and which is the theme of the conference, I don't know that governments necessarily want us to build an independent parliament. Not that I don't think it is desirable, and I certainly agree with the previous speaker. But I don't see the actions that get taken that will make that a reality. I don't know that there is a need for it in the eyes of those who make those decisions. If you wanted financial autonomy, we have the model in the region. One very good model is the Caribbean Court of Justice. Before it was set up, in order to insulate the court, the Supreme Court of the Caribbean, from the vagaries of political and budget manipulation, they established a trust fund. I believe in the first instance it was $100 million US. That fund, or the proceeds from that fund, the interest from that fund, is what pays for the court. And I understand it's topped up from time to time. But unlike some institutions, the UN comes to mind, where countries show their displeasure by withdrawing payments or withholding payments in any given period or year. In the case of the Caribbean Court of Justice, their funding is fully assured through their trust fund. And the governments do not have, they certainly have overview, but they don't have management of that trust fund. And in that way, the court is insulated. This is one model if we wanted to have an independently financed parliament. But beyond that, and I'm also conscious of the time because I want to leave the time for the discussion, the Q&A and the discussion to follow. I want to go to my last slide. And in this concluding slide, I ask myself, what is it that we have control of as a parliament? We may not have control over our budgets. They may still go through a lot of hoops and hurdles, be they ministries of finance, be they all the various reporting mechanisms or application mechanisms. Until that changes, there are things that we do have some control over or some influence over. And I'd like to end with a few recommendations, if you will, suggestions, in terms of how we move forward. Two things. In Trinidad and Tobago, when I asked, in preparing this, I asked, so what do we do to justify the expense of Parliament? One of the things that was suggested to me is the use of partnerships and the use of oversight tools. As we look beyond that, what are some of the suggestions and conclusions? How do we create a paperless green parliament? In other words, how do we demonstrate that we are actively, genuinely trying to reduce costs? Be they hybrid virtual meetings, and we needed to do it in the era of COVID. That has fallen off in some instances. So here are, whoops, let me just see what's happening with the slides. And I am not quite sure. Here are the conclusions and some suggestions. And I'm offering these to be a little bit provocative and to spark, and I hope, prime the pump for the discussion to follow. 5 suggestions. The whole point of funding a parliament is that the citizenry, the electorate, must see a meaningful impact. Do we demonstrate that impact, both by the laws that are passed and the quality of those laws, and by the quality of the activities? When houses debate, and when that debate becomes less than edifying, it may have an entertainment value, but I'm not sure that it communicates to people that they are getting value for money. Even if the parliament does the work and does the work well, it is our job to persuasively communicate not simply the level of activity or the activities, but the outcomes. You know, the thing about parliaments and what we do is that our story is going to be told whether we tell it or not. The question becomes, how do we as a parliament communicate to the country as a whole, our respective countries, what we are doing on their behalf? We can say many things, But ultimately, it will come down to whether when people look at us, do they see us displaying efficiency? Do they see us displaying responsiveness? And simply saying we can't or we couldn't simply does not sit well after a while. So that while there is significant executive influence in Trinidad and Tobago over the financial allocation, and it does hurt the effectiveness of Parliament, our job is to actively demonstrate efficiency and responsiveness. Very separately, what this Parliament, or the administration of this Parliament has learned, is that it has to demonstrate that it is actively containing costs. Costs simply cannot be an add-on to last year's numbers with an add-on for inflation. Some form of zero-based budgeting, some form of consciously looking to see where can we reduce costs really does start to communicate to people that it matters. And ultimately, the Parliament must pursue innovations and must be seen as pursuing novel solutions and innovations, so that it is not same old, but that it is modern, that it delivers, and even when some of those initiatives do not succeed perhaps the way we hope, that people could at least say they are trying. Let's give them a chance. With that, Mr. Moderator, I wrap up my presentation and I look forward to the discussion we're to have. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Francis Lewis, for your professorial and provocative presentation and some realistic recommendations. The floor is open for questions or comments. Yes.
Okay. I think you spoke very eloquently about Senator Lewis's presentation, professorial. It's not rooted in reality. But the fact of the matter is, whether we like it or not, the Parliament exists to further the aims of the executive. Put it however you want to look at it. That's what it does. Ministers come to Parliament with bills so that they can fulfill manifesto promises. You might say a bill supports the population, but it supports the population only because that executive member believes it will help him. We are not this philanthropic set of people that we would like to think we are. We are parliamentarians to remain in office. Nobody goes to be in opposition. I was trying to make the nexus between the reference to Nepal, the parliament being burned. The parliament was burned because ministers were corrupt, not because the parliament was bad. It was corruption of the ministers and the prime minister which caused the building to be burned. The parliament building is just that. It's not parliament. It's parliament only when we are inside of it. Other than that, it's just a building. And his reference to the CCJ, pardon me, is so misguided. Members who fund the CCJ are not members of the CCJ. So I can't understand the relevance between members of the parliament and the executive and the CCJ being used as an example. But the reality is the people who appoint the judges are appointed by the governments. So the governments do have an indirect role in the appointment of the judges. But to go to Senator Lewis's point, when Ramesh Maharaj was the Attorney General of Trinidad and Tobago, and the Chief Justice came to him and said, listen, I need some funding to put more judges. And Ramesh was not in favor of more judges. So without the funding, the the Chief Justice appointed acting judges, which didn't require government approval. And the Attorney General went back to Cabinet and asked the Cabinet to reduce his budgetary allocation and said to the Chief Justice, you fund those acting justices now. There was no money to fund them. The reality is, I don't know, and even in Trinidad and Tobago, the current president of the Senate, in his earlier iteration in 2010, attempted to bring a bill for the independence of the Parliament. He's back 10 years later, and that bill hasn't seen the light of day. The reality is, in our system, in the Westminster system, there is an incestuous relationship between the Parliament and the executive, because the executive comes out of the Parliament. But what affects the everyday person is the activity of the executive. So people give more credence to the executive than they do to the Parliament. Every constitution of every member here, the first branch of government spoken of in the Constitution is the legislature. The Governor General, then the legislature. And it takes you another maybe 20 sections before you get to the executive. That's in the Constitution. But that's not the reality. The reality is the executive, in the words of my Trinidadian friends, run things. That's the reality. And we must not pretend that we can wish this away. No executive member is going to come to the Parliament, which meets 2-3 times a month, and take away their own authority and give it to a speaker who in most of our jurisdictions is not an elected member of he's appointed by the elected members, but it doesn't have a constituency himself or herself. Who's going to do that? We are dealing with human nature. And human beings will never mature sufficiently to remove power from themselves. President Roosevelt said in his 4th term that was too much authority for one man to have 4 terms as US president. He brought the amendment to limit it to 2 terms. President Trump is there now saying he can serve a 3rd term. So that's just my view for the time being there.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, go ahead.
Kwesi Thompson from the Bahamas, Member of Parliament. I agree a lot with what the member for St. Lucia said. I've served as the Deputy Speaker in the House at one point, and also served as the Minister of State for Finance during another term. So I've seen both sides of the coin on this issue. But the member for Trinidad raises a very interesting point in that what is the value that the citizens are seeing from Parliament? Because the spend is also related to the value that the citizens see. And the real question that I wanted to sort of pull out is, if the funding of Parliament ultimately comes from government spending, and government spends according to their priorities, what does a truly financial independent Parliament look like? Because ultimately, the monies come out of one pot. And the Minister of Finance, regardless of, and I agree with what the member for St. Lucia said, the Minister of Finance is the ultimate judge as to the government's priorities. In most cases, it's the Prime Minister. So what really does a financial independent Parliament look like? Because parliaments do not make their own money. So they are still dependent upon the government to provide that financial backing. So yes, we can manage our own monies, and it makes sense for us to manage our own monies. But ultimately, if there is a need of Parliament, that need of Parliament still has to be approved by the Minister of Finance, who has to take it out of the government's pot. So ultimately, if we lived in an ideal world, what does a financially independent Parliament look like?
Just respond. What I want to understand is this word independent. That's what I'm trying to understand. We make up the Parliament, we as in the executive. So what is the independence that we keep referring to? I don't, that's the part I don't get. Because Parliament is not the Speaker and the staff. Parliament is constituted when the members who are elected and the members who are selected sit. So for example, even yesterday, not yesterday, the opening, I kept hearing from a number of your colleagues in the Bahamas referring to members of Parliament and senators, when your constitution clearly states Parliament is the King, the House of Representatives, and the Senate. But you make that distinction. So just imagine how you already, what the judges call the unconscious bias, that you already have an unconscious bias about people who are not elected. And I'm sure all of you heard it on Monday and Tuesday. The reference was to my parliamentary colleagues and senators. So there's already an unconscious bias against senators because nobody elected them. Because it's the elected people who get to appoint through the Prime Minister and leader of the opposition, get to nominate the senators. But just think about that unconscious bias already. I know you don't mean it, but the reality is it comes out. Think now about taking away your own authority to give to an unelected speaker, to manage a non-existent parliament, because it only exists when we sit in it. If we are not there, there is no parliament. So it's the independence I'm trying to understand.
Yeah, can I be a little provocative myself, Speaker Francis? Isn't it the fact that you mentioned what's happening in the United States today and President Trump taking all of this executive authority? Isn't that a result because the people who have the authority, the Congress and the Senate, simply abrogating their responsibility to act? Can that translate to us in Parliament in that the reason the executive has become so dominant is because the parliamentarians, right, have abrogated their responsibility and just let the executive run amok?
Well, not quite. It's because the Supreme Court keeps saying the president is okay. If the Supreme Court says, I mean, the Constitution is very clear. It's not about abrogating your authority. The Constitution is clear. Financial decisions belong to the Congress. But is the president putting tariffs? And the Supreme Court, day before yesterday, said, yeah, let him hold on to that. We'll look at it a little later. In the meantime, $500 billion in tariffs have been collected. Now, how smart are people? I always believe the Caribbean has the smartest people, actually, because only in America can tariffs be deemed a tax on a business and not a tax on a consumer. In the Caribbean, that couldn't pass muster. We would have seen through that. But, yeah, but it's not the Congress hasn't done anything. But the reality is the Supreme Court has ruled consistently that the president can do what he's doing. And that's where the problem is. Now, that is supposed to be...
But Congress can still...
But that is supposed to be...
They can change the laws.
The independent arm, the judiciary. How independent is that judiciary? And we talk about an independent parliament.
Okay.
But Mr. Moderator, I think your point is significant, in that while the role of Parliament is to facilitate the executive, isn't also the role of Parliament to hold the executive to account? But that is ultimately the role of the legislature. Well, again, when it goes down to that same point about having large cabinets and obviously having the majority in parliaments, but that still does not change the responsibility of the legislature, that one of your roles is to hold the executive to account.
And I'm with you, and that works theoretically. I'm a very pragmatic person.
Yeah.
How does it work in reality? Why do you think committees in our system don't work? All that has to take is 2 ministers to say, well, I ain't coming and there's no quorum, you know. That's all it takes. There's no quorum. So who's going to hold anybody responsible? You cannot hold yourself.
But then the parliamentarians need to appeal to the people that they represent, the people, because the people have the ultimate choice. And the ultimate check on a runaway executive was an election.
With all due
But because we like to, and getting back to the funding, none of us in Parliament usually questions funding for the judiciary, because we all say that should be independent and everything
That's
else.
because we are not part of it.
Right, but the question is that because of the image of the judiciary and how the judiciary conducts itself, both in the courthouse and in the wider community, versus how parliamentarians conduct themselves in Parliament and therefore in the wider community? And why aren't we as parliamentarians demanding or getting the same respect that the judiciary is getting?
Because we don't respect ourselves. I mean, we allow judges, listen, we go to, the judges, whenever they have a point to make, come as a team. There is no parliament in the Caribbean that I'm aware of where a salaries review commission recommends an increase and the opposition agrees. And as soon as they get into government, they agree. But whilst in opposition, they see it as good politics to oppose because we're saving the people money. But I'll give you another example. You go back to from maybe 1900s to the 1970s. The majority of politicians were elected to the House on ability. We are now elected on popularity. We're not elected on ability anymore. It's how popular we are. So this guy can come up with his PhDs, professor this, and some nut out there is popular, the nut is going to get elected. That's the reality. I mean, and we don't treat ourselves, I mean, I'll tell you, for example, the Deputy Prime Minister, I've been thinking about that man's speech on Monday, and I thought he was so classy when he said to the opposition, there's an election coming, but don't worry, we'll invite you after the election. I mean, you know what those words meant, but they were not insultive. They were very classy. But how many of us do that? We go on a platform and we tear down our opponent, and then we go down to the lounge and have a drink with him after we berated him publicly. So we have no respect for ourselves. I mean, you don't. The Supreme Court in the US, there are many inferior courts which disagree with what the Supreme Court is doing. Do you hear them going out there and saying anything? No. But not us politicians. Man, we have the worst things to say about the best people. And so,
I was the first young professional elected to Parliament in Cayman in 1984. Before that, they were all senior business people that graduated to Parliament. And we had good people. They were elected, like as you said, on their ability. And one of the things that I did was I introduced salaries for MPs, which would allow young professionals to follow me, because a young professional in age 30 or around about couldn't possibly give up their profession to go into Parliament for $25 a day when Parliament meets. No, sir, I took a shellacking by my fellow politicians for being so brave as to say that parliamentarians should be paid properly. And I reminded them of what Sir Freddie Smith, yeah, who was in Cayman at the time, helping us review our constitution. And the old MP in my district got up and said, yeah, there's Mr. Miller there, all he's interested for is the money. And you know, Sleepy Smith had a way of people think he was sleeping. But he wasn't sleeping, he piped up, he says, yes, he says, Mr. E. Banks, you pay peanuts, you get monkeys. So.
Mr. Chair, without hogging, my final point to the Trinidad, to show you how politicians behave. Ramesh Maharaj was the most famous human rights lawyer in the Caribbean, to the point where he stood up and was arrested, was imprisoned for standing up for human rights. He eventually went to the Privy Council and won. He became Attorney General, and the same rights he was protecting as a human rights lawyer. He hanged 9 people in one day. You remember that? The man who was the most famous human rights lawyer became the Attorney General. He now had a constituency to look to get votes. He hanged 9 fellas in one day.
Hello,
Go ahead.
Vance Campbell from Bermuda. In reference to the comments by the honorable member from St. Lucia, what he says is correct in many jurisdictions. However, I have to ask, why are we here then? If we aren't going to use the mechanisms that exist to try and hold the government to account, the executive to account, then why are we here? There are ways we can perfect things that are in existence or bring other measures to the table to hold the executive to account. And when I listen to you, we should probably just throw up our hands and walk away because there's nothing we can do. So why are we here today? Because we want to do something. And we have measures, we have oversight committees. We have to use those oversight committees properly. Maybe they should be open to the public in areas where they aren't, so the public can see the deliberations. But surely, and I've heard you say that a number of times, and I'm not picking on you, but this is the reality. We can change the reality. We've seen examples in history where the reality has been changed, and we can change this reality if we have the will and we want to implement and take action. Those are my comments.
I'm agreeing with you. Yeah. I'm simply saying this forum is not the forum. We have to do it individually in our respective parliament.
Absolutely.
We are just beating a dead horse here. Because nothing we say here can impact our respective parliaments.
But we
That's all I'm saying.
we can gain some measure of strength, knowing that other people feel and are looking to do the same thing we're looking to do. We can draw strength from that. Can we not?
You think so?
BVI?
Mr. Moderator,
I think BVI was first. Okay, all right, go ahead. Who else was about to speak? BVI has declined. Oh, Mr. Lewis.
thank you very much. I am so sorry for not being in Bahamas. To my colleague from St. Lucia and others, Boy, I would have loved to have sat down and have a cup of tea and have a rip-roaring old talk on this. Yes, we do have to worry. And you know, I did not take professorial as a dismissive. But thank you very much, Mr. Moderator, for that very kind adjective. I think we have to decide what kind of institution we want. I'll give you two contrasts. One side is the Parliament of China has, I understand, over 3,000 members. It meets, I believe, 1 week a year, perhaps twice. The Parliament of Cuba, I think, has fewer members than 3,000. They meet twice a year. The Parliament is subordinate to the party, and the party forms the executive. If that is the form of government you want, all power to you. I'm cool. But under the constitution that have established our various parliaments and the office I hold, I am not a speed bump. I am not a pothole. I am part of the mechanism by which an executive achieves its objectives. And I'll be the first to tell you I support an executive having legitimately won an election. They have the right to govern and are deserving of support. At the same time, often because of impatience, sometimes because things can be better developed, the Parliament serves a very useful role in terms of strengthening how the country is governed. And this is not in any way being obstructionistic. So I do respect your pragmatism. Like you, I think of myself as very pragmatic. But what the question of today's topic did, that I thought so very useful, was that it does raise the question, causes us to think about what does an independent parliament look like? I think one of the persons raised that as I think is a very legitimate question. And if we take nothing from today, I think that is a very useful question, not for political theory, but for political practice. I want to suggest that governments will govern better and the country will be better with a strong and engaged parliament. And in any event, as colleagues have pointed out, the parliament, the government has a majority in parliament, both in the House and in the Senate, where there's bicameral houses. So the Speaker and the President of the Senate are chosen by the government. Having financing to be able to do what Parliament itself says it needs to do, and that Parliament, the majority of the government members, I don't think it is a matter, for me, I agree with my colleague, Catherine, that it is a matter about efficiency, it is a matter about responsiveness, and ultimately is a matter of effectiveness. And since we are all answerable in one way or the other, whether elected or appointed, to the wider population of our countries, we have to be able to demonstrate to them that whatever was spent, every blessed red cent, was spent as well as it possibly could be. And that means we have a job to do. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you, thank you. Any other questions? If not, we are a little bit over time, so we have an AGM. So I would like to thank you all for participating and thank Honorable Catherine and Senator Francis Lewis for their presentation. Thank you.